Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the course Kinesiology of the Musculoskeletal System. Today we're going to discuss the kinesiology of the pelvis and hip joint. So both of these regions going to be covered today. So let's get started. And as always, I would like to start with a little bit of anatomy here, just to remind you how pelvis look like. And we're going to start with the lateral pelvic anatomy. So as you can see here, the pelvis consists of three bones, so ilium bone, pubical bone, and os ischiae, and all three bones forms the acetabulum, so the joint surface of the hip joint. Some of the other structures I would like you to put your attention on are muscular insertion points, so the gluteus medius, as you can see here, with the orange field, as well as gluteus minimus, obviously some of the muscles of the hip and pelvis that we're going to discuss later on during this section. So you can take a pause and observe all the structures that are mentioned here on the slide. And the next part of the pelvis we need to observe is anterior pelvic. So here pubical symphysis is highlighted, which is a relatively immobile structure. It's classified as synarthrosis, and there is a 2 millimeter of translation and minimal rotation that happens during the movement of the pelvis and hip. So it also has proprioceptors, indicating that it might be the source of pain, according to the Doha Agreement of the groin pain. Also, rectus femoris is mentioned here, insertion point of it, and the iliacus insertion. You can also observe some of the other structures you might be interested in is sacroiliacal joint and the lower parts of the lumbar spine, and I also mentioned on this slide, as well as you can observe here the head of the femur. So it's relatively uncovered here, which means that it's a possible part of anterior instability because of the lack of any bony structures that can limit excessive hip anterior translation during hip extension movements. And once again, here we can observe some abductors insertions and adductor insertions on the pubic bone. Probably some other important things to mention here are that main pelvic functions are the muscular insertion point. Then it also helps us to transfer the weight from the upper body to the legs and vice versa. As well, it helps us to protect the internal organs with the help of the pelvic floor muscles, which we're not going to cover today during our lecture because of its complexity and relatively small impact on the kinesiology of the musculoskeletal system here, talking about hip and pelvis. So the next thing that we need to cover is obviously the posterior pelvic anatomy. Once again, here you can see the sacrum connects to the ilium. Pubical symphysis is also shown here. As well, we can see the insertion point once again of some hip extensors and some posterior cuff muscles of the hip. You can see how the head of the femur is covered here by bony structures, so it really means that there is a little bit more of a passive stability that comes from the pelvis. So once again, take a little pause and get a break to observe all the structures mentioned here on this slide, because I found them really helpful in order to understand what happens around the pelvic anatomically. So let's go to the hip joint. Here we have the superior view and the acetabulum that covers the femoral head. So you can see it together with the femoral neck and greater trochanter, which is a main insertion point for the muscles of the hip. So here you can see once again how the femoral head is covered by the bony structures on both sides, so anteriorly and posteriorly, and we have a really good reinforcement by the bony structures from the posterior part, and only a little in terms of bony reinforcement anteriorly. So even though you might hear at some point that hip joint comparing to the shoulder joint is really covered by bony structure, still remember that it's not enough, and the muscles play a huge role in terms of joint stability here, active stability. And in terms of any pathology of these muscles, we see a lot of different issues of the joint. So both anterior, posterior instability, impingement syndromes, malversions, dysplasias, and so on. Okay, so talking about femur anatomy, we know that femur is the longest bone in the body, so there is a correlation between its size and stride length, therefore. So the longer femur you have, the longer stride potentially you will have during your gait or running. And the femoral neck ensures lateral offset of the bone shaft from the joint, thus reducing bone impingement against the pelvis during the movement. Medial offset of the femoral shaft positions the knee and feet closer to the midline and helps withstand greater load. So you can see that bone is not really vertical. It's a kind of triangular shape of the bone is seen here. And what you can also see on the slide is a dotted line proximally around the neck of the femur. So it's a capsular ligament insertion. Once again, you can see the iliopsoas insertional point, which is a vertical stabilizer of the lumbar spine, and it really helps to stabilize the hip joint as well here anteriorly to provide excessive anterior translation with the ligaments, so that we're going to discuss today. And the shape of the femur during growth is determined by its loading surrounding muscle function, metabolism, and location of the growth zones. So disrupt development of this bone leads to femoral dysplasia. We're going to discuss a little bit today. Once again, the shape of the femur affects joint stability, function, and load on surrounding structure. So it's really important to take care of this bone and load it properly, especially during childhood, in order to achieve the maximal congruence of the joint and the maximal possible anatomical shape of the femur. Okay, so some important angles and orientations once again in terms of hip joint in this case. And talking about frontal plane, we usually talk about angle of inclination. So the inclination angle is the angle between the femoral neck, as you can see here, and the shaft of the femur in the frontal plane. At the birth, we know that the angle is approximately 165, 170 degrees, and between ages 2 and 8 years, the angle decreases by 2 degrees due to muscle activity and axial loading. Subsequently, this decrease continues variably until reaching a normal value of approximately 125 degrees in adulthood. So it's a quite variable, as you can see, but we know that the borders here are less than 105 degrees. So in this case, we talk about coxa vara. And if the angle is more than 100 degrees, we usually use to name this coxa valga. So it's an abnormal inclination which leads to altered hip joint biomechanics and more severe joint pathology, which can potentially lead to joint dislocation or accelerated accumulation of the structural changes. So it's really important to take a look at what is going on with your hips, because there are some biomechanical relationships we're going to talk about just right now. But overall, it's really important to remember that hip morphology is a thing that we need to screen usually during our training sessions in order to potentially improve our performance and decrease any risk of overloading. So talking about impact on the hip joint, if we're talking about coxa valga and vara and how these conditions may affect the hip mechanics. So we know that all these things may increase risk of anterior inferior tabular impingement and also ischiofemoral impingement. So both of the places are highlighted here with the orange circles. And we also know that these coxa vara and valga may impact gluteus medius and minimus muscles in their work. So usually if we have a longer neck of the femur and more vertical aligned, they become mechanically disadvantaged. So it's created more of a vertical force, and the condition might have greater impact when it's occur alongside other morphological issues, such as acetabular dysplasia I have also mentioned, and from this perspective, it's really important to take a look at some clinical indicators of the neck shaft variation.